Have you heard about the role of the subconscious mind and how it relates to your overall health and fertility? And how do emotions like fear affect your body? And what can you do if you're living in a constant state of what if? The mind-body connection is so powerful and something not to be underestimated. On today's episode, I am speaking with Dr. Katie Rose, who will help you understand how to align your body and your mind in the best way possible when you're trying to conceive.
Welcome to Your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited about our guest. I think that she is the ultimate combination of science and spirit. Dr. Katie Rose is a licensed naturopathic physician. She's a hypnotherapist and a fertility coach who has been helping hundreds of couples overcome infertility for many, many years now. Her unique 3-step method to support the body, the mind, and spirit has allowed her clients to conceive despite years of unexplained infertility, unsuccessful IVF treatments, PCOS, Hashimoto's, endometriosis, and recurrent pregnancy losses. Katie and I live on the complete opposite sides of the world to each other, but I was actually lucky enough to meet her in person at a conference last year. She saw that I was on my way to a conference and she reached out to me on Instagram and said, I think you're going to the same conference that I'm going to. So it was such a treat to meet her. She has this really beautiful, genuine, caring, and knowledgeable energy about her. And she is exactly the sort of person that you want in your corner if you are trying to conceive. So I hope that you get a lot out of today's episode. Let's get into it. Here is Katie. Katie, I'm so happy to be finally sitting down with you to record this podcast. You are such just an incredible wealth of knowledge on so many things, and I can't wait to get into this episode today. But can we start by learning a little bit about the work that you do and how you came to do that kind of work?
Yes, Jen, I'm so happy to be here. And I think like so many of us who end up in this work, we have our own little personal journey of getting here and getting frustrated and needing to find our own way. And mine began when I was in medical school and I decided to come off birth control. And I knew in my heart that someday I wanted to be a mother, and I'd been on birth control for so long that I really didn't know what my body was like without it. So I had this sort of maybe quarter life crisis where I said, screw the pill, and I threw it in the trash and I thought, let's see what happens. And then I didn't get a period for 6 months, and then another 4 months, and then another 6 months. And I finally got into my longtime OBGYN and like, what the heck is happening here? And she was like, oh, it can just take some people a while to reset after being on birth control, but it's fine. And all your labs looked normal and there's no reason for us to worry. And I confided in her. I hadn't told anyone else this yet, but I told her it's actually my greatest fear that I might not be able to become a mother. Like, this isn't giving me good feedback. And I'm wondering if there's anything else we can do. And she said, really, until you start trying, there's nothing that we can do. You start trying, you come back in a year, we'll see what happens. If it bothers you so much that you're not getting a period, just go back on the pill. And I tell you, yes. In case you can't see both our faces, the level of frustration was 12 out of 10. And I didn't know how to process my emotions at that time either. I mean, I was very bottled up, very numbed up. All I knew was like primary colors of like rage, some sadness, but certainly don't cry in front of people. And I knew that I was scared. And that fear ultimately lit a fire under me to find out what was going on, learn how to nourish my body. And it took me on around a 3.5-year journey of DIYing to figure out what I needed before my cycles came back to some level of regularity. And they weren't even regular when I conceived my first son. I tell people maybe TMI in some worlds, but here I know that people will appreciate hearing that I probably ovulated on around day 40 of my cycle when he was conceived. And that both shook me because I was at a point of, deep frustration of like, when the hell is this going to happen? Like, when's my body going to start finally like shaping up, acting like she's supposed to? But also was like, oh, your period doesn't have to be perfect to get pregnant. I've been fed a lie. And after he was born and it took a while to reset my cycle afterwards, my cycles were actually more regular after he was born and I was finished breastfeeding than they'd ever been in my life. And so I just thought, this is so interesting. We're clearly missing a lot of pieces in our medical school training for this. And that ultimately led me to working as a naturopathic doctor specializing in fertility.
Thank you for sharing that. It is something I hear, and I'm sure you hear over and over and over again. This whole, your cycle doesn't matter unless you want to get pregnant. And in the meantime, just go back on the pill if you want to have a regular cycle. Like, it's just blows my mind that this is the advice given to women, and it just, that's women's health for you. So frustrating. So you decided to specialize more in women's health and fertility. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and the work that it ultimately led you to now?
Absolutely. So this would have been around the 10-year ago mark that I said, you know what, we just need more resources for this. My best friend simultaneously was going through IVF, and there wasn't much available locally to us to support her. And so I, again, started diving to, okay, well, if I were to support someone going through IVF, what would they need? How do I improve my acupuncture skills? Because I had done a dual program in medicine and acupuncture. And I just threw everything into that, all of the learning into what it looks like to support holistic fertility. And yet my approach was still very physical. All right. It was still looking at, okay, well, how do we need to help someone with their nutrition and the supplementation and blood flow and circulation and getting inflammation down and regulating blood sugar, all good things. But at a certain point, maybe around 5 years ago, I found that with so many people, we were hitting a wall of like, they truly were doing everything right. And yet we were missing something. And as I just talked to more people, as I developed my own group program, and we were having deeper conversations because, all the education learning was taking place outside of our group meetups, was that there was this strongly emotional component that had never really been addressed as deeply as it could have been. Addressing the fears, the emotional processing, actually acknowledging how hard this is, and not just putting up this front of positivity 24/7. And as we dug into that, and as I got more training and education in emotional processing work, EFT tapping and hypnosis, that unlocked like another level of progress that we were able to see in my patient client results.
It's so amazing that you say that. And you're right. You can see it where someone is doing all the things. And I was this person. I had done everything right. I was doing everything perfectly, yet things still weren't happening. And that was the turning point for me. It was like, well, there's something missing here. And I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to find out, but I'm going to. And, it was the only thing that made my life feel livable again, was this, well, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at some of these emotions that are coming up. And no one ever really teaches you what to do with all of that constant chatter and thinking that we get into when we are struggling to conceive. And I put up a post on social media yesterday about some of the darkest thoughts that people have when they're struggling on this journey. And the things that people shared, and it's like, this is where your mind is going and taking you to every single day. And to think that that doesn't have an impact on our body, I think is very naive and something that isn't addressed ever in the Western medical world, but something that is so, so important to talk about. So As a hypnotherapist and a coach, and I mean, you do so much of this work, what role does that subconscious and all of those subconscious beliefs have on fertility?
Um, so just in case someone is listening, they're just not fully versed in the role of the conscious versus the unconscious mind. We are operating from like maybe 5% of our consciousness, right? And so that means if we look at our whole being as an iceberg, we have that little tip of the iceberg that's poking up above the water, and then everything underneath that is the unconscious. And this is, our upbringing, the conditioning that we received from parents and society and religion and education, and maybe even hearing stories that we put in there is like, oh, okay, well, that's something I've learned, and now maybe I'll take that on as a belief. And even as we go through this fertility journey, when things aren't happening, we may start to have thoughts that we take on as beliefs, like maybe my body is broken. Maybe if it hasn't happened yet, I'm just not meant to be a mother. Maybe I don't really have a purpose here. And when we really start to take that on as a belief, even if we're not consciously aware of how that's cycling, it has an impact on our body. It has an impact on our physical functioning, our cell functioning. So now that studies have shown that we have, around 60,000 thoughts per day, and around 40 to 80% of those, depending on the person, of those thoughts are negative thoughts, and we're repeating 90% of those thoughts, that has an impact on our body.
It's impossible to think that that wouldn't have an impact on your body, isn't it? And I think if you hear someone say something to you that's negative, you immediately take that on and think about it and process it. And imagine if you are constantly telling yourself these negative things over and over again, it is impossible to think that that's not going to have an impact on your body, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if we're walking around relatively unaware of it, because we can't possibly be looking at every single thing that we're meant to process, everything. We've got like 50 million bits of information coming at us at any given time. Like we can only pick up around like 20 of those bits at most. So that's not a lot. And when we're just walking around in that manner, we don't realize how much power our mind has.
Yeah. And so how do we even start to flip that or change that? And why is it so important that we do?
How we start to flip it, I actually start with most people with this exercise I call the lemon exercise. And it's so simple and yet so powerful for showing people the power of their thoughts and imagination. So I think everyone, I hope, has smelled or tasted a lemon in their lifetime. But if you imagine right now that you have picked a lemon and you bring it inside and you lay it on the cutting board and you slice it open and you can see all those little flecks kind of coming off of it, those bursts of lemon essence, and you can smell that and you already start to feel your mouth starting to salivate. It's like getting ready to taste that lemon. And so that wasn't actually happening, right? We're just imagining the lemon. We're just thinking about the lemon and we already have this physical response. So I think just giving people an example of how easily our physical body responds to something we're thinking about wakes people up to, oh, there's something happening physiologically. And now if I can just be more aware of my thoughts, it doesn't mean that you have to force yourself into this toxic positivity. When you notice a thought and you're like, ooh, oh gosh, I'm such a terrible human being and I can't believe I'm having that thought. And like, I was already thinking about going off the bridge, but I might as well just go for it. No, it's more about bringing compassion to your thoughts and seeing the thoughts as if they're just a cloud in the sky. And eventually the breeze is going to take that thought away and another one can come take its place.
Yes, recognizing thoughts for what they are, which are just thoughts. They're not reality. They're not set in stone. So can you explain a little bit how thoughts then affect our fertility?
So if we know that it creates this impulse, and while we don't know exactly where a thought originates, we know that it creates this electrical impulse in the brain. And this impulse will travel from neuron to neuron. And eventually that impulse lands outside of the central nervous system. So we'll land on a cell outside the nervous system and that creates a cell response. So when it comes to fertility, we know that when we are in fight or flight mode, when the nervous system is highly activated in that sympathetic state, it changes blood flow direction. It changes blood flow in the sense that it will redirect the flow of blood to our skeletal muscle, our brain. So if we need to run from that lion, our body is prepared to do so. So if we're having these thoughts that create a stress response, we change that physical response as well. And the body will start to view the importance of our vital organs as highest priority. And the reproductive system is not part of the vital organs. So it just puts that on the back burner of like, okay, we're getting all these signals that it's not safe right now to conceive. So we're not going to send resources there. So it really puts the emphasis on nourishing the nervous system.
Yeah. Which is
when we're focusing on fertility.
Huge topic, isn't it? So, and we will get into some of that. Yeah, it is amazing. And, people say this to me all the time. They're like, well, people get stressed when they're pregnant all the time. So why do I need to worry about my stress levels and, regulating my nervous system? And the way I explain this, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Yes, you absolutely can get stressed. You can get pregnant, when you are stressed. We know women in war zones get pregnant, women in abusive relationships get pregnant. But that doesn't mean that it's going to make your life any easier. It can make your journey to conception longer and more difficult. And the biggest thing I find, from my own personal experience and watching all of my students, is that it just makes your life so miserable being in this stress response state. When you are so hypervigilant and so on edge all of the time, it just takes over your entire life. And sure, you can push your body and you can override a lot of those hormonal issues through treatments like IVF. And I did that and it does work, but I don't think that sets you up for a particularly healthy pregnancy or calm or enjoyable pregnancy. And it certainly doesn't set you up for, your experiences as a new parent, which are, ultimately that's the whole point of this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you normally say to people when you're talking about stress and why it is so important for them?
Yeah. I do address how unfair it is up front that someone in a war zone or someone who is, living unhoused, using drugs is getting pregnant, and emphasizing the need to release comparison and that victim mentality of like, why me? Why does it always happen for everyone else except me? Like, I understand it and I have compassion for it, and it's not of high service for your vision or your goals. So like you described, it doesn't feel good to be in that state. And it's certainly not the healthiest state to be in mentally, emotionally going into a pregnancy. And we have more and more data coming out about how, the mother's mental and emotional state can impact the child later on. And yes, in parenthood. And because you and I are on the other side of it, and we've probably seen how children are our greatest mirrors, and they will show us all the wounds that we have not healed yet. For the people who are facing this now, preconception, there's a new opportunity to do this differently. And I don't know exactly what the individual lessons are going to be for each one of you listening, but I do know that if you are willing to do things differently, it will set you up for a more easeful pregnancy, a more easeful parenting journey, and just having that awareness so that you're also, it's not all going to be easy, but you will grow to that challenge in a way that you'll be proud of.
And it's so easy to say that, isn't it? But when you are able to look back at it in hindsight.
Yes, this all 2020 in hindsight.
It is. And I say to people all the time, I don't know why this is a challenge in your life. I don't know why this has come up. And I don't know why you have to go through so much heartache and so much loss and so much pain. But maybe one day you'll be able to look back and understand, what everything, not that we're ever going to want to, like it, or you have to always be grateful for every part of your journey. I don't think, when someone has been through multiple losses and late-term losses, we don't have to be grateful for everything that we've been through, but maybe one day it will make sense. And that is the only hope that I think we can give to people sometimes. Can we talk a bit about fear? And I think that because we're humans, we are so hardwired to go to focus on the things that are scary. It's like, you get 9 compliments from someone and then you get 1 negative piece of feedback from someone. And that is all you focus on. The 9 compliments are out the window. So we are so hardwired to be kind of looking for this like sign of danger or safety throughout our lives, right? So why do we do that? Even though we live in a day and age where the tiger is not about to come and attack us, because that's not how we live anymore. And how can we get out of that constant state of being on edge and looking for that danger?
Yeah. Well, the why are we hardwired for it does really go back to our probably early days of what we maybe went through generations and generations ago. And it was wired for our survival.
Mm.
And our brain, that is really all our brain is wired for, is our survival. And not necessarily our thriving, our doing well, or being our happiest, right? It's looking for the threats so that you can plan ahead and you can survive them. So for anyone who's out there like, oh yeah, my brain is really good at that. It's really good at the worst case scenarios and planning for all of them. It's like, great. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to. And when you can pause and bring awareness to that and just start to notice like, whoo, that was a really interesting thought pattern or imaginative experience that I just had. And just find pause. That's the starting point. There are plenty of tools that I use in my practice, and there's no one right way. There's not an only way that you can release fear. You can use journaling, you can use EFT tapping, you can talk to a trusted provider, a coach, a therapist, and you can find a support community where you know that you're not alone. Because when you learn, oh, everyone else is having the same fears and we're all actually okay and we're safe, then, that can bring a sense of humor into it as well. You're like, oh my gosh, look at all of us and, bark it up about all this fear and like, okay, we're going to be all right. There's just so many ways that you can do that. Maybe the most hopeful thing that people can know is that there's many opportunities for releasing fear and that you don't have to do it alone. There's, communities like yours, and there's really communities all over the place that are designed to help people now with this. And the reason it's important to address it is if we're just allowing it to simmer beneath the surface all the time, it's keeping us in that highly activated state. Fight or flight, people are aware of that verbiage, but the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response is also a direction that our nervous system can go. And it keeps us stuck or feeling like we need to run away from something all the time. And when we can acknowledge it and actually find the tool to process it and release it from the body, then we find that state of, oh, I can actually rest and I'm safe to relax now. Because it's not just about just relax and it'll happen. A lot of us don't feel safe to relax. So if we're told just relax, it's highly frustrating. It's like, I don't know how. I wasn't born with this manual. I was born to survive. And my survival has not allowed me to relax. So thank you very much.
So true, isn't it? So how do we get around those sort of blocks? I mean, the fear, I would imagine, contributes to a lot of those subconscious blocks that we mentioned before. Is that right?
It is. It's one of the most common that I hear about as people start talking about what's coming up in their journey. And it may be one that people are more conscious of. I'm scared that I'm getting too old. I'm scared that this isn't going to happen. I'm scared that there's something really wrong with my body and it's not capable of doing this. But there may also be subconscious fears that are blocking conception as well. And I actually hate the word blocking because it's really more of like this veil that's like, oh, once we find it, we just gently pull it aside. And so I don't want to instill more fear into people and they're like, oh my God, I already knew I was scared, but now I have subconscious fears I don't know about. Like,
So how would we know that we have those subconscious fears? Like, how are they going to show up?
Yeah. This is where getting some help can be really impactful because most of us aren't aware of our own blind spots. And sometimes we have a situation where someone truly desires in their heart to be a mother, but they're also afraid of being a mother. Maybe their own childhood set them up for that fear because of the way in which they were parented. Their mother yelled at them a lot, and she wasn't resourced to deal with her own emotions or nervous system. And so the childhood experience, to them, there's like this internal conflict. Like, I really want this. I think I would be good at it, but I'm scared of it because I don't want to turn into my mother. Or maybe there's a fear of childbirth, and they've, heard the stories from every one of their friends that, oh, this is the most horrible, painful thing I've ever gone through. And they're like, oh my gosh, I really want this. Like, I don't know if I can go through that. I don't know if my body's capable of childbirth. So asking questions in a very curious manner will often bring those to the surface in a way that we can address them with compassion and just gently move them to the side and say, okay, now that you see it, does that actually feel true for you? Does that really belong to you, or was that passed down from somewhere else?
That is a really hard one to acknowledge, isn't it? Because you don't know what you don't know. So like you said, having someone point it out, and the first time someone pointed out all of these subconscious things that I was going through as well, it was a little bit confronting, very eye-opening, and it's hard. It's so hard to address these deep-seated beliefs because your brain's like, don't go there, don't go there. This is too painful. I don't want to think about the fact that maybe I'm too old and I've missed my chance. And every doctor has told me I have such a low chance of actually having this work. And, it's really, really scary and really hard. But I find that the only way to move through these is to show your brain that you've considered like the worst case scenario, the worst, and that you survived and you're okay. Do you find that helps where you go, okay, well, what's the worst that could possibly happen, but I'll actually be okay? Do you find that helps with people?
Yeah. We do that exercise quite frequently while using some anchoring tools to remind their nervous system that they are indeed safe, because we want to make sure that someone has the resources to go into that zone of possibility. And then to also train the brain for, well, what is also the best case scenario? Because we're so well trained to go to the worst case scenario or stop ourselves just at a certain point of, I'll go here, but I won't go there. And so we use tools and resourcing, and in the, subconscious world, sometimes we might install an anchor that reminds someone of how strong they are, how loved they are, how confident they have been in certain situations, so that as you then start tiptoeing down the path of what would be the worst thing that could happen, that you would also survive and be okay, they have that strength and resource. They know that that's actually something they're capable of.
So incredibly important. So what are some of these anchoring tools that you use, or just other tools in general that you find are really helpful for women getting through this?
Yeah. So one of them is actually called anchoring, and it's literally finding a spot on the body that we might say like, okay, we're going to use your first knuckle here, and we'll call forward a time when you felt so deeply loved, a time in your life when you remember what unconditional love feels like and looks like, and you can feel that blossoming in your heart, and it feels so strong and so positive that you just feel overwhelmed by it through your whole body. And at the peak of that feeling, we'll have them hold the anchor and then release. And we'll repeat that several times until that anchor can be used to elicit the feeling state. So that as we go in and start processing painful memories or painful possibilities that their brain has created, we have a resource anchor for them to call upon to remember the strength and the love that is actually within them.
So powerful.
I also love EFT tapping, and I think you've explored it on the podcast as well. It's just one of my favorite tools of all time because you can use it for just about any situation, and it's free, and you really can't fuck it up. So it's just one of my favorites. I go on tapping walks in my neighborhood. I'm sure I'm just known as like that crazy lady. What is she doing?
Embrace it.
I fully do.
It's one of those things that tapping, it's like it's too good to be true. Like, oh, how can this be so effective and it's so easy and free? And yeah, one of those very powerful tools that people can learn so easily. Can we talk a little bit about the role of spirituality on this journey? And for a lot of people, if you're not religious, it's sort of hard to connect to that sense of purpose or that kind of higher guidance when you are struggling, and very hard to kind of put it all into perspective and to look at, why could this be happening in terms of my own personal growth? And we don't want to address any of those things when we're struggling. But when someone...
No, it can be very difficult.
Very difficult, right? But when you are able to connect to kind of your higher purpose or your higher self or the universe or whatever you want to call it, how do you find that really helps people on their journeys?
Oh, I think it's one of the most impactful things that we can have available to us. I think if I were to create a sort of foundational pyramid the way our food system does, I would put nervous system regulation and intuition as our foundation of the pyramid. And part of that intuition is tapping into that higher self. So this is completely religion aside. And interestingly enough, I've had many people who have been raised with strong religion find that because of that overpowering religious education, they actually were not able to tap into their own intuition because they're relying on this outside feedback. So when I think about intuition, I think about what is your inner knowing? How do you feel that? And how does it come to you? Because it will come through differently for different people. And not only are you able to access it, but do you feel safe to follow your intuition? And if not, how can we resource you to feel safe to follow it? So that would be number one. And it's so important because when you think about all of the expert advice that someone might receive on this journey, if that expert advice does not actually align with you, your body, your intuition, it's really not that valuable. And it gives us a sense of empowerment to really know within ourselves what feels true, what feels right, and the decisions that we have to make, because these are big decisions. And we don't want other people making them for us. Those are the decisions that we usually end up second guessing.
Gosh, that is so true.
More fear.
Yeah, it sure does. So why, how do we even start to listen to that intuition? I mean, that's a huge question.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and I resisted this so hard, is finding quiet, just tuning out noise. And this for me was a practice that I had so much resistance to because it also meant having to be present to a lot of the uncomfortable emotions that wanted to be witnessed and seen as well. And they were very loud in the beginning of my own journey of finding silence and intuition. And it was to the extent for me, I had actually been assigned by a practitioner just 10 minutes a day of silence. And I was like, oh my God, like I wanted to run from that. And I would find every excuse not to do it. Like, I have just so many things to do. And then, oh, now I have to walk the dog. And now I have to do this and that. And it's just like, just brain, just shh. And sometimes it needs to run out of all the things. But there are some practices that I have found over the years to help me, because my brain tends to be very busy, to anchor into a sense of quieter. And one of those is just to notice where my feet are. Can I notice what my feet are doing? Can they be grounded? Can I imagine this grounding cord going from my feet all the way to the earth? Can I notice my breath? Do I notice how the breath actually lands in my body? And even as I start to say that with you, like I can feel my internal system slowing down. And it's a practice, right? And I think that's why yoga is so impactful. And I do believe that for me, yoga was one of the things that really supported me in my postpartum and preconception leading up to my second son. It was that time of day when I had this stillness in my mind. And sometimes it would still fire things up. And then I'd have to come back into my body and be present in my body again.
Mm.
And sometimes, much to my amusement, I would just cry in yoga. And I'd be like, what the hell is this? And as I got more and more comfortable in understanding what was happening, I was like, oh, this is just a release and it's okay. So that was an impactful way for me to find intuition. But I invite your listeners to get curious around what type of experience would allow them to find some quieting of the mind.
Mm. We are so resistant to it. And I am a yoga and a meditation teacher, and I still struggle with it. So don't think that you have to be good. And that's the thing people ask me all the time. Like, well, how am I meant to meditate where I'm terrible at it and I can't sit still? And I'm like, well, don't sit still. Go for a walk.
Yeah.
You know, take your phone and put it on airplane mode so it can't bother you, and just notice, how do your feet feel when you walk? How does the temperature of the air feel on your skin? You know, what can you notice around you? And there are so many ways to find silence, and you don't always have to find physical stillness to get that mental stillness, right? You can come into your body is such a powerful way to do it. Like you said, even through a yoga practice, we get to that mental stillness by coming into our bodies as well, which is not something we're taught. Back to the list of things that we're not taught. And you're right.
Where's my manual?
Where's the manual? Why did we learn this at school? You do have to kind of run out of things, right? As you said, your brain has to go, okay, well, I've already been through all of the things. Now what? Oh, okay. Maybe it's okay to leave them. And you're right. It's a practice. It's something that we have to do all the time, consistently, to make a real impact on the body. So thank you for sharing that. I love, we're so aligned in everything that we approach and teach, and it's so beautiful to hear it from another person's perspective. I find it really lands differently every time you hear someone explain something in a slightly different way. So thank you for that. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Katie, was this method that you have developed, like this 3-step method for helping the women that you work with get to their goal of bringing their baby home. Can you explain a little bit about what that is and how it works and why it's so important?
Yeah. So step 1 is just really understanding what your unique body requires. And that means there's no cookie cutter approach that can be applied to everyone. You can't all take the same 17 supplements from that book that everyone has read and expect that it's going to have this magical result if you need something differently. So we really have to understand you as an individual, what your story of origin is, what your labs look like, and in doing so, we can get more simplified and customized so that you're not feeling like you have to do all the things and just checking off a million things on a list every single day. And the second step is, like, as we get people feeling a little bit more confident in that first step, I take them through what I've dubbed the reproductive safety arc. So looking at the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual components of your being, and what does your entire being need to feel safe? And that part is exploring more of those realms that aren't talked about in Western medicine. You're not walking into your IVF office going, have you processed your emotions and connected with your spirit babies today? No. And yet, like, this is an area that when we feel safe to do so, things just begin to unlock in a way that is really beautiful. And the third step is embodiment. So when you start to feel safe, when you have this plan that's very customized and simplified, and you can start to see and feel into what's that future going to look like if I were able to imagine my best case scenario. And if we can zoom out a year, 2 years, 5 years from now and see everything the way that you would want it in your best case scenario, and you can learn from that version of yourself and ask from that version, if I believed this about myself, if I thought differently, how can I apply that to now?
Well, there's such a powerful reframe, isn't it? And not something that we want to do. It's the here and now. It's the what supplement do I have to take today? What do I have to do tomorrow? What appointment do I need to make sure I've got my calendar? It's very rarely do we zoom out and say, well, would I make that decision if I knew for an absolute guarantee that I would be pregnant in 6 months' time? Would I make that same decision today? And I think that's a really powerful mindset to get people into. So thank you for sharing that as well. You are the ultimate blend of the science and the spiritual, Katie, and I think that's everything that I wish I had known when I was struggling to conceive. And it's everything that I will want people listening to this to know, that blending the both is the magic formula, I think. And I hope people find their own blend of that, and it helps them to not just build their families, but to build a life that they're truly excited about. And that's the greatest gift that you can give to yourself. Before we finish up, is there anything that you want to leave people with, or anything that we haven't talked about today that you think is important to mention?
Well, if we're going to go a little bit on the woo side that we've touched on, but I do fully believe on that spiritual front that, like, we're entering a new era, and the spirits that are essentially being called forth to help with the way this planet is going at this time, it's going to require something different of us. And there is a lot of letting go and a lot of trauma processing that will be required with this particular slew of parents who are trying, so that when these souls come in, they're not having to deal with all that old BS. And that is going to be challenging. I'm not saying that it's going to be amazingly easy, and yet there are so many people going through it. And I have wondered sometimes if that's part of why we're seeing, even further decline in the fertility numbers, is that we're really being called to do something differently. So if you're listening to this podcast, I don't think it's any coincidence that this message was for you. And there's so many beautiful episodes of this podcast to support you in that journey of your soul. And so having trust that you are actually in the right place at the right time, even if it doesn't make sense right now.
Thank you. You have so many beautiful resources that you can share with people. You have a podcast of your own. Where is the best place to reach you and find more about you, Katie?
Yes, the best place to find me is usually on Instagram at Dr. Katie Rose. I host the Brilliant Fertility podcast, and a few times a year, I open doors to the Brilliant Fertility program, which is a very in-depth, intimate program to peel back all of these layers that we've discussed today and take people through that 3-step process of embodiment. And this is it's not going anywhere anytime soon, so I'll be around.
Thank you. And I'll make sure to leave links to all of those in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all of your beautiful wisdom. And we could just listen to your calming voice all day long. So please,
I feel the same.
Jump over to Katie's podcast because it is beautiful. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks for listening right to the end of today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed hearing from Katie and got a lot out of what she had to say. I think it's such a rare thing to find someone who really embodies that full spectrum of the really sciencey, practical, medical aspects of this journey with those really deepest spiritual and woo-woo practices. And as you know, that is what this podcast is all about. So it was a real treat to have her and meet her today. So if you have a question for the podcast, if there's something that you'd like to know, or just have your question kind of answered within a theme or a topic, or you want to suggest a guest, then please feel free to. You can always send me an email, but I have a link where you can leave me a quick voice note. You'll find it in the show notes. So if you want to just click on that and send me your thoughts, that would be absolutely amazing. You'll also find all of Dr. Katie Rose's links in the show notes too. And if you have any questions, she would love to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out. Before we finish up today, if you have 30 seconds, I would absolutely love it if you could leave a quick written review for the show. That is the very best way for us to help share the word and to get all of this incredible information, all these wonderful guests out to as many people as possible. So Next week, we are going to be speaking about the sacred rituals of fertility and the science behind ceremony. Oh, I'm excited just thinking about this one. I can't wait to have you back for that episode next week. But until then, I am sending you all of my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.